Hi, my name is Reed Silverne. The name of this show is Fed Pride. Reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker and proud of it. Let me take a spin of the earth, the traditional spin of the earth. If you've seen my show, and I seem to be upside down. But here's North America, and here's our home in Arizona. So basically, I'm a retired federal worker, rehired, and soon to be re-retired next month. For me, today is October 29th. For you, because I'm on live, it's October 29th, or it will be any other rewrite that occurs during the course, or re-showing during the course of the next 3 weeks. So hopefully in 3 weeks, I'll be able to make another show, and then we'll be able to do this again. I know that I've been on TV, and my show has been on over the last couple months, but in fact, those shows are old, and this is the first new show I've been able to do in quite a while. And the reason is because Access Tucson is open. It's open part-time. It's not really just charging, but a lot of my friends are back working again. The people who work here are wonderful, and I have nothing but good things to say about it. And I'm very, very proud of them for getting funded to the point where they could reopen. And I'm very, very proud of the people that set up my shot and did things and did all these wonderful things. Now, this is live, so that if I make a real screw up, like have the world upside down, or right side up if you happen to live in Australia, that's the way it is. Because what you see is what you're going to get. And even if you're watching a rerun, if I fall off this chair, I will fall off the chair even in the rerun. What I'm going to talk about today is the foreclosure crisis. Now, people are going to think, gee, for us, it's October 29th, if you're watching me live. There's an election coming up in a couple days. For those people who watch the reruns, they're going to say, I know what happened in that election, and you don't. And I don't. So I'm not going to talk about the election because this is going to be the show for the next 3 weeks or so, and maybe after. So I'm going to talk about the foreclosure crisis. And people say, well, what foreclosure crisis? I don't know about a foreclosure crisis. But what has happened in the last couple months is that a number of attorney generals, state attorney generals, have come together and they've challenged the way the banks are doing foreclosures. Now, the banks are required to sign an affidavit. Some states require judicial review so that if you don't like the fact that you're getting foreclosed on, you can take it to a judge. But most states do not. They have non-judicial mortgage foreclosures. And non-judicial means you can't go to a judge, we just foreclose you. But even in the states that allow non-judicial foreclosures, the bank has to sign an affidavit that says that, first of all, that you haven't paid your mortgage, that you're in default of the contract, because a mortgage is a contract. And secondly, that they have the right to foreclose you. And that's a really good question, because most of the banks that you deal with when you have a mortgage aren't the bank that owns your mortgage. You get a letter that says Bank of America is now taking over your mortgage and send your payment to such and such an address at such and such a Bank of America collection center. And you think, well, they must own my mortgage. Well, the fact of the matter is almost all mortgages are serviced by the bank that collects your money, but that bank does not own your mortgage. You may have gotten your mortgage from Countrywide. Countrywide mortgage doesn't even exist. Went out of business, taken over by Bank of America. You may have gotten your mortgage from Magnus. Magnus went out of business years ago, a couple years ago. So the fact of the matter is, the person who is and company that's foreclosing you, that's taking your home away, that's throwing you out on the street, they are just servicing banks. They don't own your mortgage, and they don't really care about you or your mortgage. And that's why we're having a big problem, because it's very, very easy for them. They get an extra fee to foreclose and kick you out, but they don't own your mortgage. They don't care whether that once the house is foreclosed on, that the public auction that's going to sell it is going to sell it for a gigantic loss. Somebody else owns that mortgage. And the fact of the matter is, in the year 2000, Congress passed the Commodities Modernization Act of 2000 that legalized what we call today derivatives or consolidated debt obligations, or CDOs. And anybody who's heard the whole rap on all these different stations, the economist comes on, he tries to explain it in terms that the layman will understand. And he says, well, they went and they took 100,000 mortgages and they put them together, and then they diced them up and chopped them up, and then they sold these CDOs, these derivatives, to hedge funds who sold them to their investors. Well, yeah, okay, that's true. But what does it mean? Well, what it means is that companies put together gigantic pools of mortgages. 1,000 mortgages, 10,000 mortgages, 100,000 mortgages, and then issued bonds. And they said these mortgages represent a yield of 6%. You buy this bond, and you're guaranteed, just like as if you bought a bond from the Treasury, from the U.S. government, or you bought a municipal bond from a city, or you bought a bond from a corporation. Well, the fact of the matter is, in real life, things don't work that way at all. When they decided to do this, it sounded like a good idea. They had written these mathematical computations based on Brownian motion that proved that these things were worth a certain amount. And no matter whether the interest rates went up and down or the default rate went up and down, no matter what happened to the actual mortgages themselves, or even if everybody who owned one of the mortgages in the pools all sold their house and paid off their mortgage, which means there's no interest there at all, that it's going to yield a certain amount. Those formulas that were written by very, very advanced PhD mathematicians, well, they were all completely false. It was garbage. It was crap. It was complete, total garbage. And that is why there is no market in CDOs right now. And there was losses of trillions of dollars. They blame it. They say, well, those losses are because of bad loans. Those losses were because default rates went up, like they magically go up. No, those losses were because the concept of derivatives is fundamentally and completely false. If you have a collection of mortgages, even if those mortgages are for 6%, you cannot issue a bond and guarantee somebody 6%. People are going to pay them off. People are not going to pay. There's no formula that establishes how much that particular bond is worth. And because of that, the whole thing went down the drain. So what does this mean? Well, this means that, fortunately, before the year 2000, when they legalized these mortgage derivatives, they couldn't have done the mortgage derivatives anyway. And that is because, let's say you have a house. Your house is worth $120,000. You get a mortgage for $100,000 on this house in this neighborhood with this address against your name. Your name is John D. Smith. You sign a contract, and that mortgage holder, not only does he have the $100,000, not only does he give you the $100,000 to be able to buy the house, but he goes down to the county recorder's office and he fills out and provides them with a deed. It's called a trust deed. And that trust deed says that even though you, John D. Smith, own this house, now Countrywide Mortgage, which has given you this $100,000, they have a claim on your house on the title of your deed, and now that's called a trust deed. And they record it with the county has the official version, they get a copy, and they put it in the vault and so on and so forth. You get a copy, you put it in the vault, and everybody keeps it until you make the last payment, and then you get a reconveyance of your deed, and you get full control over your property again. And that's how the system worked. Well, that system has gone sour. And the reason it's gone sour is because I can't put 10,000 or 100,000 mortgages together and then sell bonds against those 100,000 mortgages because I'm really selling those mortgages. And every time I sell a deed, which is a trust deed, which is what a mortgage really is, I have to go down to the county and record it. So these people who put these derivatives together would have had to go to every county in the country. If he has 100,000 derivatives or 100,000 mortgages, he would have to put all these derivatives together, all these different trust deeds, and he would have to re-record it with every single county in the country. This can be done, but it costs money. You have to have people in local offices, cuts into your bonus, your $1 billion bonus. It's very, very inconvenient. And these derivatives, it's called wet financing, which is a lot like wet work for spies and things like that, which means that it kills people. And yes, these were financial death sentences. So what did they do? Well, what they were trying to do to put these CDOs together, they either had to go re-record every time they sold a derivative, or they put the mortgage pool together, or they bought a mortgage for the mortgage pool. They would have to record it with all these different counties, and they didn't want to do it. So what they did is they rewrote the law of 45 states to legalize what they wanted to do. And the law covering buying and selling inventory, borrowing and lending on inventory, borrowing and lending on business, borrowing and lending on titles, and that's basically what a mortgage is. It's a trust deed. It's a title. It's saying that I, as the bank, have given you money, and in return, I have claim on the title of your property. You don't pay, that property's mine. That's called a foreclosure. So what they did is they created the Mortgage Electronic Registration Service, called MERS. And MERS has members, and almost all the banks are members of MERS. The hedge funds are members of MERS. The servicing banks are members of MERS. And they went in and they changed what they call the Uniform Commercial Code. Well, in 1950, they realized that companies were doing business in a whole bunch of states, and they had interstate commerce, and all the rules on buying and selling, lending and borrowing, and so on and so forth, were controlled by state governments. It's the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, by the way. And the state governments had different laws. So they set up a uniform commercial code, and they put together a board of experts, and they wrote laws that were fair to buyers and sellers, to borrowers and lenders, to investors and securities, all these different players. And that became the law of all the states that would adopt the Uniform Commercial Code. Uniform because different states would adopt the same code. Well, what does that code say? Well, that code says that if you sell a mortgage, you have to record it with the county. And that's fair, because how are you as a debtor going to know what's going on with your trust deed and with your property and who owns it if they don't go and record it against your property in the county? So what they did is they took the Uniform Commercial Code, they bought basically the board that writes those, and they changed it. And this was in the year 2001. Now, they could have just changed it and said, well, now we're going to create this MERS, and instead of recording in the county, we'll just record it through MERS. But they didn't. What they did is they rewrote all the laws and rules governing mortgages, and not just mortgages, but anything that is borrowed against a title. Car loans, manufactured homes, RVs, you name it. Anything that is so big that you have to record a title. And what they did is they said, first of all, that we are no longer going to require a deed that's recorded with the county. What we're going to do is we're going to have a financial statement. And the financial statement is good so long as it follows the rules of the issuer of the financial statement. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that as long as you follow the rules of MERS, you're good. Well, what are the rules of MERS? The rules of MERS are basically open. Now, one of the things that MERS allows is for MERS, if they take a trust deed or they take your mortgage and then they sell it to a hedge fund that has a pool of mortgages for derivatives, they get to change the name of the person that now owns the trust deed. Well, in a normal world, if you have a contract with somebody and somebody says, well, I want to sell my contract to somebody else, they would tell you about it. And usually, since a contract is a contract between two parties, you would have to agree with it. Well, one thing they put into the rewrite is that even if in your mortgage contract it says that they can't sell the mortgage to another party without your approval, they can still sell the mortgage to a party without your approval. And that's actually in the law. Another thing that's in the UCC rewrite that wasn't there before, basically, if you have a contract with somebody and that contract is against a title, which means it's significant, it's not just a minor issue, it's not like making a bet, or it's not like a verbal agreement. If they change that agreement, both sides have to agree to it. Well, we can't have that. Then MERS would have to actually get approval, and they'd have to have you write something, and then they would have to figure out who you are, and then they'd have to put that in their record. Well, that's just too complicated. So in the UCC rewrite, it says that they can amend your contract. They can amend your mortgage without your approval, only with the approval of the secured party, which is the bank. So the bank can approve a change to your contract that you signed and the bank signed. I'll tell you, that's completely against normal contract law. Normal contract law is an agreement between both parties. And to change that agreement, both parties have to agree, unless there's something specifically in the agreement that says no, both parties don't have to agree. But you would be crazy to sign a document that says that they can change a contract above your signature without your agreement. Now, there's a couple things that they can't change. They can't replace you with another debtor. So they can't, the guy down the street, they can't put his name down instead of you and then take his property. Or if he doesn't pay your mortgage, to take your property. They can't raise the amount of the mortgage. They can't terminate the mortgage without notifying you. But they can do anything else. They can double your interest rate. They can change it from fixed to ARM. That doesn't mean that they're doing that, but according to the UCC rewrite, they can do that. Now, even worse, the UCC rewrite, MERS just found it very, very difficult. Now, MERS is this organization that all the big banks and the finance companies belong to. What they do is you become a member of MERS, and then you take your mortgage, you put it in MERS, and MERS becomes the mortgagor of record. And so instead of Countrywide Mortgage or Bank of America, now MERS is the owner of your mortgage. But MERS says, I don't want your property. I don't want any interest in it. I don't want to bother with it. I might end up with it. So they're the mortgagor of record, but they don't own a trust deed. Oh, how can you do that when a mortgage is a trust deed? Well, once it goes in the MERS system, MERS puts an entry into a database, and then, of course, they can amend that with the approval of one of the parties, who's the bank and not you, and they can change the terms of the mortgage, except for a couple, and then they can transfer it to anybody they want, as many times as they want, and even more so, they can transfer it and create a contract for the servicing bank, and they could swap out one servicing bank for another anytime they want. And it's still, as long as it stays inside MERS. And then it doesn't leave MERS until you've paid it off, or you go into default and they foreclose you. So basically, MERS can do anything you want. Now, there's another couple little things in here that are just really bizarre. One thing that's bizarre is that one of the things that makes a contract, and especially a contract to borrow money against a title, the name of the person who owes the money, well, I think that's pretty important. If John D. Smith owns the property and he owes the mortgage company $100,000, well, I'll tell you something. Murray Jones is going to be real surprised when he ends up with his name on the mortgage and he hasn't been paying his $1,500 a month, and he now owns it. So what happens if MERS writes the wrong guy's name down and basically indebts somebody who should not be indebted, who never agreed to be indebted? Well, according to the UCC rewrite, putting the wrong debtor's name, putting the wrong address, that is a seriously misleading entry into the financial statement. Well, you'd think that anything that's legally called seriously misleading, if it's done intentionally, that would be fraud, it should make the contract unenforceable. And after all, Mr. Jones never took out a mortgage on anything, and he shouldn't have to pay $1,500 a month. So what happens if MERS puts down the wrong name? Well, there's a clause that is now in state law in 45 states that says even if there's a seriously misleading entry in a financial statement in MERS, it's still enforceable. And that's why people who don't even own the property are getting foreclosed on, and people who own property that doesn't even have a mortgage are being foreclosed on. All is happening because of this UCC, Uniform Commercial Code rewrite. The worst thing of all is to come, and that is MERS. Of course, they have millions of mortgages, between 30 and 60 million mortgages were put into this MERS system. And were turned into mostly into derivatives. Well, that's a lot of paper. There's a lot of trustees. Those are a lot of mortgage agreements. It's a lot of backup information. So MERS, when this group was rewriting the Uniform Commercial Code, MERS and the banks went to them and said, we don't want to keep all this paper. So they actually put a clause into state law of 45 states that says that MERS could throw the original paperwork away as long as they put the same information into MERS, into the electronic recording registration system, to the computer. And then there's another one that says even if they did put the wrong information, and even if it turns that mortgage to become seriously misleading, it's still enforceable. So no matter what you do, as long as you're under this UCC rewrite, basically everything is enforceable no matter how wrong it is. So what I'm saying is we need a proposition in our state and in all these other states to change the Uniform Commercial Code and go back to the system that we had. My name's Reed Silverne. The name of the show is Fed Pride.